Good afternoon, and welcome to Capturing and Evaluating Analytics on your Microsoft 365 Maturity Model. My name is Peter Carson, your co-presenter today, President of Envision IT, and also an Office Apps and Services MVP. Contact details are up on the screen here. We're going to be sharing a copy of the deck up on the event page, and we'll send a follow-up email out to everybody on that as well. And you'll be able to grab that as well as the recording shortly after the presentation. Also joining me is John White. John, I'll let you do an intro on your side.
Hi, Peter. Well, glad to be here. I'm John White. I'm the president and co-founder of a company called Unlimitedviz. We are the makers of tyGraph, and I will be talking to you about that a little more later today. I'm also a Microsoft MVP in Apps and Services as well as Data Platform. Yeah, I love how Peter's put outdoorsman up there. I'm not sure that I've ever been accused of that. Scuba diver is vacation, and it also explains my rather weird Twitter handle. So you can reach out to me and follow stuff at Diverdown1964. Also, I have a blog on mostly on business intelligence topics at whitepages.unlimitedviz.com.
Cool. Thanks, John.
No problem.
So we got about 45 minutes. This is actually the first time John and I have delivered this particular topic, so we'll figure out the timing as we go and try and keep it within that. We're going to start with a quick recap. So this is part 2 of a 3-part webinar series that we're doing on a maturity model that we put together here at Envision IT for Microsoft 365. So we're going to do a quick recap on that side. And then we actually have a maturity survey that we put together as a Microsoft form. So I've distributed that out to the staff of Envision IT just as a sample data set. We'll kind of go through that. I'm also going to be providing the link for people to get themselves. Love for participants to be able to fill that in, and we can share anonymized results back with people from that. We're then going to turn to Microsoft 365 Analytics. So what comes out of the box from Microsoft? What do they provide to you, and what sort of questions can you answer and things can you figure out from that perspective, both from the in Microsoft 365, but also that we've done around Power BI and the Graph API to be able to pull some of that analytics data right into our own dashboards. Then we're going to switch gears over, as John mentioned, providing to have a much broader, deeper set of analytics available. He's going to take us through some of those and some of the decisions we might make, looking at what comes out of those analytics. And we'll wrap up with the teaser into our upcoming webinar and go from there. So let me start with the recap side. I'm just going to turn off my web as we go through here. So we've been putting together what we call this Envision IT Microsoft 365 maturity model, going from informal, I'm using it, but maybe not anywhere near to the full extent, right out to optimized from there. And while Microsoft 365 is a very broad set of products and services, we're focused on some key workloads here. So Microsoft Teams, obviously being the hot one these days with everybody working remotely with COVID. SharePoint, which is the behind-the-scenes document collaboration underneath that, and OneDrive from a personal document storage point of view. Outlook, of course, still from an email perspective. Stream from a recordings, particularly recordings of calls like this that you have through Teams. OneNote from a jot note point of view, and Planner and To-Do from a task management perspective. So I'm not going to go through all the details on here. Apologies, there's a lot of content on this particular slide here. I'll leave it more as a reference, but it's really looking through each of those workloads and understanding, as an organization, as an individual, sort of behaviors do we see as you move up that maturity model through there. And a lot of it has to do with this idea of what to use when, which is often a very confusing topic for organizations. They've got a lot of choice from Microsoft. We'll notice that the asterisks are a little bit small. You can see typically, though, there's more than one per line in here, which means for any one thing that I want to do, like sending and receiving information, I could do that through email, or I could do that through Teams. And actually, even within Teams, I can do it in a number of different ways. Now, with choice comes complexity and often confusion, because different parts of the organization may choose different ways to communicate. So part of it is understanding what makes the most sense for your organization and putting the change management and adoption programs in place to drive those behaviors. And that's pretty what we're going to be talking about here today, which is how do you measure those behaviors? Where do you put yourself on a scale? And so we've actually put together a little self-service survey. We've used Microsoft Forms to build this out, and we've published it here. So actually, if I grab this off of the slide here, it's a slightly different one. Let me tap this to the entire audience. Basically, this is an anonymous Microsoft form that you can go to that goes through a number of questions to kind of evaluate how you're using different products. And let me actually go through it together to give you a sense of what that looks like. Now, all the questions are optional. You don't have to fill in anything you don't want to. So you can actually leave your name and email if you don't want to be identified from that point of view. And it starts by first at a very high level. Do you even use Microsoft 365? Some people may not be sure. They may have had their email migrated to 365, but unless you're very aware, you might not even know that that's happened. But then within the 365 stack, which particular products, again, not the full suite, the ones that we're focused on, are you currently using? If you continue through, then we get into these broader grids to get a sense of how frequently do you use different modes of doing work from a modern workplace point of view, from a communication. And we've called out internally specifically because it is going to be different from an external versus internal. If we look at Envision IT ourselves, we're very Teams channel conversation focused as an organization internally, but that's a little tougher when you get external parties involved. Tend to fall back to email from that point of view, because bringing external guests into your teams, while it's possible, and we certainly got some clients that are well adopted on Teams and we're running big projects that way, it's the exception rather than the norm. So, kind of getting a sense for each of these. Do you never use that particular method? Rarely, occasionally, frequently. And then we've got the same theme as we go through different topics. So from a documents point of view, are you still using your C drive and your local My Documents, or do you have file shares still, or OneDrive or Team sites that you're using for those? And as you collaborate, are you still attaching documents to emails and sending them, which is kind of the old school, pre-modern way of doing things? We really encourage people to use links, whether it's to OneDrive or SharePoint, which allows you to do things like co-authoring on documents as well. And then lastly, just from an online meeting point of view, are you using Teams? How often do you share your webcam? I've kind of made a personal decision that I tend to always share my webcam on Teams meetings. Not everybody does. The more people do, the more it encourages the general group to. And I find that the meetings are actually a lot more valuable. They're a lot more engaged when it is more than just a voice on a phone. Sharing your screen, of course, is extremely useful, like I'm doing now, being able to present that out from that point of view. And ultimately recording those as well. We do quite a bit as well. So if I have to look at the Envision IT side, so this is the public one that I've shared with you. I have a copy of that form that we've done internally, and I can just take you through what that looks like for us. So not surprisingly, everybody answered correctly and said, yes, we use Microsoft 365 at Envision IT. So kudos to staff on that side. But there is a mix of products. I mean, if we look at Teams, SharePoint, Outlook, OneNote, we use those extensively. So everybody uses those for sure. But as we get into Stream, not everybody uses that from that perspective. We do a lot of screen recordings. We'll see that later down. OneDrive, everybody has, uses to a certain degree, but Planner and Two maybe a little less so. I mean, Planner is a group way to manage project tasks. We don't use it on all of our projects, but some of them we do, particularly internally ones. And To Do is sort of a personal task management that rolls that up together. It actually feeds from Planner as well as from Outlook and a number of other sources. It's kind of Microsoft's vision of the one place to go to manage your own tasks. So I'm using it myself, a couple other staff are, but it's still not well adopted across the organization. And if we look at how we work, email kind of across the board being used internally, a little bit of SMS, not much, most people rarely or occasionally, but a lot of chat going on, a lot of group chat, channel conversations, mentions, team reactions, those are all big for us because we've been using Teams for over 2 years now. It's become really embedded in our culture. And likewise, related to that, we really discourage using your My Documents. We don't have active file shares. There's a couple of projects where, from a development point of view, we're using file shares, but from a day-to-day document point of view, not happening at all there. It's either OneDrive or more predominantly Microsoft Teams sites. And when we're sharing around, there's still a little bit of email attachments. If a client forwards an email to us, we might forward it internally to somebody else, although best practice is to put that into Teams in a team site and then start the team conversation. Sometimes it's easier to just hit forward and carry on from there. But links to OneDrive and more predominantly links to Teams, a lot of co-authoring going on is very important to us. And then from an online meeting point of view, obviously everybody's using Teams at Envision IT. A mix on the webcam side, though. I mean, I've got to try and encourage more of my staff to be more commonly using the webcam. I think it's an important tool to use as part of that. Obviously, sharing the screen, everybody pretty much is doing that. And recording, actually do quite a bit of. We're actually recording this session, but our team sessions that we do through Teams, even with clients, it's a common practice to record those sessions through there. So it's a fun thing. I mean, we're planning on publishing this out. I encourage everybody to fill it out. We're going to take time out during the session today. What we will do is anonymize the data and present it back to the group for anybody joining next week's webinar from there. And we can give a link to the results back for the next session. That's something that you can do internally yourself, is put together your own form survey. In fact, we can publish this one out. As a template, feel free to grab and make from there. But then flipping on from there, what we want to do is think about how do you do that all up throughout your organization? Rather than asking users, what sort of tools do you have available to dig under the hood in Microsoft 365 to actually see them? And there's actually quite a number of reports that are available in the out-of-the-box admin experience. I'm going to flip over to my admin portal here so we can actually see that. So I need to be a global administrator. So I'm signed in with my privileged account. I have access to the various different reports here as part of my admin console. I don't see them when I first come in. I just hit the see all, and it expands this menu out so I can find those. And the first is productivity score. And it's kind of Microsoft's approach. Here, having some your productivity score as an organization. Theirs is fairly simplistic. It's looking at what tools are you using. Here, are you using 2 or more products to communicate? That in my mind is not actually a good measure. It means, okay, if you're using Teams and email, count from that point of view. What I'm more interested in is how do you actually use those tools? And that's what we're going to dive into a little deeper from there. And similar sort of thing, how often do people collaborate with online files, use mobile access, and different things. It actually builds out a productivity score. We're actually doing pretty good. If we look at this little gray bar here, that's a peer benchmark. What they do is they aggregate results across similar size organizations. So they're not comparing us to enterprise orgs, they're comparing us to other, we're a 17-person organization, sort of a couple dozen person organization is my assumption, and getting a sense how we benchmark in there. I'm happy to see that we're well above the benchmark because, I mean, we are supposed to be the early adopters and, eat your own dog food, as Microsoft likes to say, actually use this stuff as soon as it comes out so that we're ahead of where our clients are from there. Obviously, there's still more room to improve from that perspective. And then I can come into the usage side and I can dig much deeper into that. This is an all-up usage that looks at, how many active users do I have? What are they doing from an email, OneDrive, SharePoint point of view? little bit of Skype for Business. I think that's just some old Skype for Business meetings on client side that we had to join. Office activations. Now, some of these numbers are a little bit skewed because as a technology company, we have lots of test accounts and dev accounts and things like that actually end up showing up in our analytics. And there's not an easy way to pull those numbers out through here. But you can start to get a very good sense of how we're using the different tools through here. And you drill down in here, you can get into the various different reports. So if I want to go much deeper into Microsoft Teams, for example, and look at user activity in here, then I can start to see things like channel message versus chat messages, which is actually a really important metric. And I'm going to show you some additional Power BI stuff that we've done around that shows that. So I won't take you through all the reports, but as an admin, you have access to this and you can dig out a fair bit of detail through here. Now, John, there are some caveats around retention of activity and granularity, right? Why don't you share a bit more background on that side?
Yeah, you'll find that throughout this this data set, and this data set drives a number of things. You'll be getting to another one of those things. I'll be touching on one of those things. But if you look at what you get out of the admin portal, you can see those date slices above are 7 days, 30 days, 90 days, 180 days. You don't get any more than those. So that gives you aggregated data based on essentially the pivot point you're looking at down there. So you can see username, you can see their last activity date, but that's for the last, in this particular case, what you're looking at, the last 30 days. So you can get this data aggregated to those timeframes. You can't get any more granular than that.
So John, even if I wanted to get a 30-day view from 3 months ago, I can't get that out of this portal here, right?
That's correct. You'd have to go 90. Well, you can't even get that. You can't look at, say, the month that was 3 months ago. You're just going to look at the past 30, the past 90, or the past 180. You could achieve that proactively if you went and got a snapshot of this every single month. You'd obviously be able to go back to your old data, but that's on you. Right,
and it wouldn't be interactive. You'd have to save it to PDF or do something awkward like that.
Yeah, or Excel, CSV. You can download CSV files from here. So that's one way to go about doing that. Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's actually a good segue because that's actually my next topic, which is what we've done from a roll your own point of view. So there's a couple of links down at the bottom here to the Microsoft Graph resources that talk about how you can actually call Graph API endpoints and extract that data out. And I'm going to get techie here for a minute, but we've pulled together a quick little PowerShell script. Now it's only focused on one of the metrics, which is the Teams usage. But there's different endpoints for all the different activity that you want to pull down from here, and you can define the different periods that you want there. And as John mentioned, I mean, you can save that as CSVs if you want to keep historical from that point of view. So you could have this as an automated process and build that out. Our goal really, though.
I was just going to jump in and say, and using your method here, you can go down now and get a 1-day granularity, but you can only get it for one specific day at a time.
Right. So with a little work, I guess you could harvest that
That's right.
detail from there. I mean, what we wanted to do was to build out some of our own dashboards with things that are important to us. And what I've done here is focused on the team side of things. And as I mentioned earlier, we're looking for particular behavior, not just the fact that people are using Teams, it's how are they using Teams. And one of the things here, John and tyGraph, you've coined the term working out loud, which is this idea of, rather than private individual conversations, which is kind of a throwback to the email world where people only communicated with specific other people and nobody else had visibility to that, this idea of working in a Teams channel, and even though you might only mention a few people, it's visible to everybody who belongs to that team. That's that idea of working out loud. And that's something I really promote at Envision IT, that there's this tremendous value as an organizational knowledge to capture that and make that available. And as search keeps getting better, it was pretty bad even 6 or 12 months ago in Teams. It has improved a lot. You can actually find that information and pull it back in. So as team members come and go in a project, for example, you don't have all that knowledge locked up in individual chats or in email threads back and forth. It's in a common searchable area that everybody has visibility to. So what I've done here is I've built a little graph that just shows that ratio of private chat to team conversations. Now, having said that, I mean, we're still predominantly doing chat messages back and forth, because they tend to be very short, quick. So from a pure count point of view, they tend to overwhelm from a numbers point of view. But driving this slice wider to say, let's side is an important driver for your organization. And even looking at people's spread through that, I practice a lot of what I preach, so I've actually got heavier on the Teams channel message than I do on the individual chat. Whereas we get some other folks, not to call out names, but like Rashawn and Jeff, I haven't actually talked to them about this, but I realize they're two developers on a full-time project with a client for a year long. They're just focused together on what they're working, and I think they do a lot of chatting back and forth from that point of view, and that really drives those numbers up. And this is just looking at a 30-day snapshot from that point of view. But what we can do is start to target people to say, hey, who are our champions? Maha, a few others through here, Eric are really doing well from a channel conversation point of view. So how do you encourage them to become champions in your organization and really drive that broader behavior from there? And just some other user activities that we can see through here, numbers of meetings, number of calls that are happening through Teams. So we've got the full voice integration calling plans with our team. So everybody has direct inbound dial numbers. We don't have a phone system other than Teams itself. Although you can see that, calls are still the exception, again, over a 30-day period. We're not actually doing that many phone calls. The vast majority of our work is actually through meetings. I looked at this, and at first I thought my meetings were a little out of skew because they're so much higher than everybody else's. And then I realized that 108 doesn't even do justice. When I look at my calendar, it's several times that. But the reason is that this is only capturing meetings that are booked through my teams. I've got that big client project I was talking about. I'm on multiple meetings every day, and that one, it's through their teams, and it doesn't get captured through here. So, John, I'd love to chat with you offline later about, maybe how do we do a bigger picture of that to capture, the Exchange calendar meeting side of it and mix that in. We don't see that through the out-of-the-box analytics, but the data is there, and it's certainly doable from that point of view.
It is.
So one of my goals here is to be able to give that PowerShell to people, say, go ahead and run it. Now, it does take a little work because you have to go into Azure and register an app ID to get the PowerShell to authenticate to Graph. So it is a little techy, but if you've got an IT administrator that can do that for you, we can harvest that data, pull it into a Power BI report like we have here, and then we don't need access to your tenant. If you are comfortable sharing that data with us, we can start to do some analysis and work with you to build out a plan on where are you in the maturity model today and how do we move you forward from that perspective. So just coming, my plan is to actually build this out as a blog article, similar to the one that I did for file share migration a little while back, where I actually provide the PowerShell right in the blog article, and I have a link to the Power BI file as well. So I'll just open source and post that out so people have access to that. You can use it yourself for your own internal purposes, or we could use it with you collaboratively to build that side of it out. So we're going to switch gears here and talk more about tyGraph, which is John's company's product, and it really, builds on top of and extends much beyond what Microsoft provides out of the box from an analytics point of view. Like I've shown you with what I've done, a little proof of concept with PowerShell. You can do some of this yourself. tyGraph goes much deeper in terms of harvesting the data for that. And this chart here kind of shows us out of the box, what do the analytics that I was just showing you capture for you? What does tyGraph capture? What the chart doesn't really explain is the much greater detail that the tyGraph lets you go into for that. Because what they basically do is have a harvesting service that's running in Azure, and it's gathering all that data from you and retaining it, so that it doesn't drop off from an analytics point of view, because Microsoft doesn't actually retain that analytics beyond that 180-day aggregate for you and allow you to do those comparisons. So John, why don't I let you talk a bit more on this side, and then we'll switch right into the actual demo of tyGraph.
Yeah, sure. And this specifically is pertaining to our Pulse product. I should give it a bit of an overview. We've got a series of products. Most of them are targeted at individual workloads. So tyGraph for SharePoint, tyGraph for OneDrive, tyGraph for Teams, and tyGraph for Yammer. And then we have our Pulse product, which is similar to the out-of-the-box, the stuff you've essentially seen. It's pulling from, in fact, from that same data source for the most part. We mix in a number of other things, and what we do for Pulse is collect that data for you on a daily basis. So all you have to do is sign up. We basically harvest that on a daily basis, and then give you access to the reports, and that's all done through Power BI. And there are a number of ways you could use our service completely. You don't have to have Power BI even, or if you have Power BI, you can use that in your own tenant, and you could even host all of the pieces of that in your own tenant as well. It depends on what your security requirements are. Cool. But you can see, yeah. You can see there's a number of endpoints that we're picking up, usually because we can be a little more nimble than what Microsoft can be out of the box. And the fact that really the big difference here is not only what we're able to provide, but the granularity in which we're able to provide it. So not only can we go back beyond the 180 days, but we can do that on a day-by-day basis. You can start to look at things, rolling year over year, etc. That said, when you first sign up with us, we're only going to be able to go back and get the last 30 days of data for you, because that's all you can get from in the case of Pulse, that's all you can get from the reporting endpoint at a 1-day level of granularity. The big boy products get their data from a different place. I've got to call them big boy products, but the ones that are specific to the, because they're big, they're collecting data from both the graph. So we're getting a comprehensive view of your inventory. What do you have? What documents do you have? What sites, lists, etc. What channels, what's going on, and exactly what is going on. So what activities you're performing, and that data is coming from the management API. And that data is granular down to the second, according to whatever properties you have on your users, on your files, etc. So I don't know if we want to go through each one of these points individually. Up to you, Pete.
Why don't we switch gears? Let's sure. Let you take over the screen and take us right
sure.
into the analytics themselves.
I'll do that for a few minutes, and you can kick my butt from a time standpoint, because like you said, this is the first one of these. All right, I'm going to make myself a presenter, and then I'm going to show my screen, and I have to show the correct screen. So let's make sure we get that right. That's going to be non-monitor 2. So you should see tyGraph Pulse in front of you. Am I right?
Yep, got it.
Cool. So what you're seeing is kind of the initial screen for tyGraph Pulse, and this is showing you what basically we're calling the DTS, the Digital Transformation Score. And that is, the idea of this thing is to give you an indication of how digitally transformed your organization is. And it's a combination really of activity for specific endpoints and a weighting according to the endpoint you're using. So we may say, we are saying that collaboration is better than point-to-point communication, which is basically email, although any kind of communication is good. So if you have an activity, a message in Teams, that might be scored at 5. If you've got activity in SharePoint, you're sharing files, etc., we might be scoring that a 3, or an email may be counting only as 1, a read or a send, etc., etc. And that's what you're seeing here for an organization. You're seeing it for a 7-month period, and you can see in this particular case the data is fake. By the way, everything you're seeing here today is available to you. You can go and pull this down into your Power BI tenant and play with this sample data. But the downside of the sample data is you can see it ends at the end of March 2019. Sample data is not easy to put together. This is not derived from a real customer. So that's why that's the case. But you can see with this sample data, this organization has been weaning itself off Skype. And it's been adopting Teams. You can see as a result, email has started to go down overall. They're also a Yammer organization. Again, it's sample data. We need to show all of the endpoints. SharePoint is being used and increased, and so overall this company is increasing their digital transformation. You can slice it down to a specific time frame if you wanted to do so, and you can see it's going to update accordingly, or I'm going to clear away that filter. I could pick specific periods, so I might want to look at the last 60 days, for example, and you can see it adapts accordingly. As well, we can tie into your HR data. If you've got a great Active Directory, it's wonderfully clean. We can just tap straight into that. If you live in the real world, we can get an extract of your.
I was going to say whose AD is clean.
Exactly. We can get an extract of your HR system, and in a lot of in a great deal to a great deal of complexity. So in this case, we've got a 2-level organization structure. So let's go. We could pick, say. Let's just search. Let's go human resources. And I'm going to just pick human resources, and we're going to see how transformed the human resources department is specifically. That's kind of right off the top. Now, if we want a little more detail around that, we can dive into the DTS detail screen. And I'm just going to clear off my filters right now. I'm going to go back to the default because they'll persist from page to page. And here's how our organization is transformed by department and by user. So you can see our most transformed user is Raul Carrasco, and the information systems, not surprisingly, is our, I'm just going to kill that. I love how Teams respects your quiet time settings. Information system is unsurprisingly our most transformed. They're the ones using all of the products. R&D is another one, and then we can see how it breaks down below that. But you can see who's moving the needle. So here's our winners, but more importantly, you might want to have a look at who's our losers. So not surprisingly, an executive office is the least transformed. This is not a good example. You want that to come from above, not from below, but as the case may be, we can see what's going on here. Their score is 9, and all they're doing is using SharePoint. They're not using any of the other workloads. So that might be a bit of a problem. Or we can just we can sort back up there. We can see for any specific workloads. Let's zero in on Teams because, of course, that's our hot item. We can see information systems as our top Teams user, but quality assurance shows up as number 2. So maybe we could go and identify some champions from the quality assurance department to communicate with some of the other departments, etc. So another way we could go about doing that, if we wanted to target, Teams adoption, we might want to look at, say, let's sort on Teams activity, people with no Teams activity at all. But we might want to have a look at people with a lot of SharePoint activities. So I'm just going to do a secondary search on SharePoint, and you can see information systems isn't using Teams at all. They're highly transformed, but they're mostly using OneDrive and SharePoint. So they might be a good candidate to teach about Teams because they're already using information systems proactively. And they're surprisingly, they're not using a lot of email. But we might want to get them to switch to using a little more of Teams, or sharing via Teams, or sharing their documents via Teams. Now, this also begs the question. I've got users, let's go back to sorting on the digital transformation score negatively. We've got users who aren't using much, and that begs the question, are we paying for things that we're not using? Let's go down over here to the license adoption page. And you can see here, again, all of our users and all of the activities in the various workloads. Now I can filter in here now on everyone who's assigned, say, an E5 license. So E5 is zeroed right in on telephony. And I could come over here now to my filters pane, which happens to be open for me. And I could look at, I'm going to do it slightly different. I'm just going to search on people who are not using Teams. And let's do a quick negative search on that. And in fact, they're also not using Skype. So what we have here are users, you can see all the blanks, there's no activity whatsoever. So these are users that have been assigned an Enterprise E5 license, but are not using either Skype or Teams. Now, chances are they could drop right down to an E3 license, because really there are differences apart from that. But the biggest driving benefit you're getting, apart from a Power BI license, is the ability to use telephony, call out, and if they're not using it, why pay for it, right? And you can even get more extreme. You'll find users that are only using SharePoint. Let's just get into that. So if we have a heavy SharePoint user, here we have a heavy SharePoint user, but they're not using any, user. They're not using any Teams, any email, any Skype, but they're just using SharePoint, OneDrive, and a little bit of Yammer. So they may qualify for just a SharePoint online license, which is considerably cheaper than, say, something like an E5. So just from a license analysis standpoint, you can mix and match what's going on there. You can drill in directly to Teams. We've been talking about Teams, so let's continue to do so. So I'm going to reset this default just in case I have any filters applied. There we go. So you can see this is a snapshot, again, at a very high level of what's going on in Teams in the organization. So you can see for, let's say, the last 30 days, that there have been 3,200 chat messages in Teams and 7,300 private messages. So chat messages in this context are channel messages, messages you've posted that other people can come in and discover. Private messages are between individuals or groups of individuals. How many meetings have been had? How many calls have been made? Not very many in this particular case, but this is, a year and a half ago. And we have this working out loud percentage, and that's essentially going to be 3,200 divided by 7,300 plus 3,200. That's the ratio of messages that are out in the open and are discoverable. One of the main benefits of using collaborative technology is that it's discoverable by others. And we have in the Teams product itself, as well as in our Yammer product, a thing called the serendipity score. And that is measuring how many people have contributed to a message thread that were never originally mentioned. It wasn't sent to them. It's really to distinguish the difference between collaborative communications and email. You can see how many people are active in Teams in the organization, 1,200 out of 3,300. And then we have this working out loud score, which is a combination of this percentage and their overall level of activity. We can see the devices people are using for Teams. Again, in the last, right here, 30 days. Let's go 90 days. It's a little more interesting because we can see what the Teams user activity is down in the bottom left-hand side here and what type of activity that was, whether it was a chat, a private message, a voice call, or a meeting. Okay. So if we want to get deeper into Teams, and I should stop and ask Peter if there's any questions so far, because I'm not watching.
I haven't actually been watching. I should be. Let me just have a peek there. No, I think we're good there.
Okay. Excellent stuff. All right. So let's see here. Okay. So let's pause for Teams.
I guess, John, if we could focus in on, what are some of the questions that you would want to answer around how mature are you as an organization and what behaviors would you want to drive as a result of that? I mean, the working out loud was a good example of that.
Yeah. So the data is here. It's kind of up for, well, let's kind of drive into that a little bit more in here. Maybe I think we might bump into that. But it's a question of, what do you want to set for yourself what do you want to set for yourself as a target? What this is going to do is help measure where you are along that path.
Yeah, and I guess the important lesson there is that you can't put a change management and adoption plan together in isolation and just hope for the best. I mean, everything should be measurable. You want to measure your current state, and you want to see how what you're doing is progressing that. And if it's not having the desired effect, then you need to adjust it.
Yeah, and you might want to think about what your targets are. What is it you're trying to get out of this digital transformation exercise? And to that end, we actually have, I can't show it to you right now, but we have from our customer base, a lot of users have subscribed to benchmarking. When you subscribe to benchmarking in tyGraph, you agree to have your data kind of munged in with everyone else's, obviously with all the identifying information removed, but that provides a real world benchmark of people who are in industries like yours, how are you doing with respect to that industry? It's a little bit akin to the productivity score you were showing before from Microsoft, yeah, but it's at a much more detailed level.
And I guess the other thing to remember is that COVID's thrown us all into this remote working world, and Teams and a lot of other remote tools have kind of been thrust on everybody, and they're using them, but maybe not anywhere near their full extent. But trying to encourage an organization to change its behavior is always a challenge, and that's going to take time. I mean, this is not a 30-day exercise to say, hey, we're going to fully embrace Microsoft's modern workplace vision. It's going to take months, if not longer, to go through that journey, and you kind of have to pick your battles. And part of the goal here is to prioritize that and figure out, well, where should I pick the battles? Is it about certain groups in my organization? Is it about certain types of behavior? What should I target from that point of view?
That's exactly right. It's up to everybody to decide what behavior they want to encourage, but these tools are really just in place to help you do that. So for an example, I just came in through, this is the Teams product, the full Teams product, and I just I zeroed in on the recent activity report, and that's showing us activity for, by default, the last 30 days. And you can see we have this thing called a May score, and you might want to know what the May score is. Well, if we hover over here, we've got this little help button on each one of the visuals. You can see what the May score is, and it's really just a combination of activities. First of all, we have to have the signal available to measure it. So the activities, and then sliced by, in this particular case, by team. You can decide over here, to your point, Peter, what activities are important to you. You may say reactions. We don't really use reactions, the likes, et cetera, et cetera. So we can turn that off, and then everything updates as a result. The calculation updates and removes that from the equation. But I like to use the entire thing. So you can see right at a glance, you can the teams with the highest May score are here, and then we have all of the top members. And of course, this being Power BI, everything is cross-filterable. I can slice on this data point, this team, and I can get the detail. Who in this team? You can see Minnie and Wileen are particularly active, but everybody else kind of tails off a little bit after that. And you can see along here how many messages and contributors there were in this team for this last 30-day time frame. And if you're interested, you can drill down on a lot of these visuals, and here you can see what times is this particular team available. This one's particularly busy in the afternoon and the late evening.
Right.
So that's one way to look at this stuff. I'm not going to get through everything, so I just want to cover off a couple of more highlights. We can get some detail on teams and channels here, how that breaks down. So we were just looking at it at the team level, but we can get down to the further level, channel by channel. If I hover over this particular channel, you can see that this channel has 4 tabs in it. There's 4 minutes in total, and on average, it takes 0.04 days to get a response in this channel. And each one of these channels, of course, has a different set of metrics, different set of results. You can jump to either the team by clicking on this link, or the channel by clicking on this link down here to see what's going on. And the interesting thing here is I can sort, by default, we're sorting on high May scores, but I can sort on low ones. And these are groups, or sorry, these are teams that are getting 0 usage whatsoever. So I could look at bond division, say maybe we don't need, these are the members of it, and here are the owners of it. I don't need that anymore. Maybe it's a candidate for deletion. I'll just send a quick email to this person here, and you can see it gets filled out. This is a fake company, so it's not going to go anywhere. That's also why I'm not jumping to the link itself, because it doesn't actually exist anymore. It did when the data was created, but that's about it. A couple of more just interesting things off the top. You can look at member interactions. I'm going to come down here and pick Nautilus Denmark. And we can see here are the team members up above, and you can see the interactions they're having with each other. These are, well, what are they? I can ask the question exactly what constitutes an interaction. I'm hovering over there to find that out. But these are basically people who've interacted with each other. It's a fairly broad set of interactions. And we can look at, I'm going to filter this down now to the last 12 months, because it's a little more interesting. And I'm going to see what's been going on in this team. I'm just going to hit the play axis on this, and you can see there's this channel down here called contracts that gets busy from time to time, but otherwise, the general channel tends to be busier. Right as of the end of March, or in March, contract was the busy channel to watch out for in this particular team. And network interactions, fairly similar. You can see who's talking with whom. If you look at, say, Face International, for this particular team, you can see there's a lot of communication between Minnie and Kabi. Wileen Hoodless is in there as well, and various people are involved at various levels. The less contact each one has with each other, the more outside of the center of the diagram they're going to be in. But with that, I'm going to cut what I was going to show you a little bit short. I do want to point out, if you'd like to explore this or any of the other products, you can come to our website. It's tygraph.com. Just click try tyGraph at the top, and you can pick one of these options. You could test drive online, and then you could literally just go and see these reports in an online scenario. You could test drive with Power BI. And that's going to take you over to here in Power BI. Come down to get, if you already have Power BI, you can get it the same way by coming down here and get data. Go into services, just punch in tyGraph up here. You can pick any one of these products that will be installed into your Power BI environment with this same sample data that I've been showing you. And finally, if you actually wanted to connect to your own tenant to try this out, you'd hit this connect to your data section. You'd come down here. If you wanted to try out Pulse, you can click Pulse. I'm not going to go any further. You would sign into your own tenant, and then you would grant tyGraph permission to the data in your tenant. We'll harvest that, send you an email, and then you're going to be able to connect all of that stuff, your actual data, into that same demo environment that you pulled out of Power BI.
Cool.
That's it for now. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was just about to put the hook out there, so that was good timing.
I thought so. Yeah.
We're at the 12:45 mark, so I just want to do a couple quick wrap-ups here. Let me share my screen back out.
Yeah, I flip back to you.
Okay. So if you're interested in learning more about the maturity model, what we can do with you as an organization to plan together a change management and adoption plan, Eric Riz is leading the charge on the Envision IT side on that. So we've got a link here to Eric's Calendly. You can use that to pick an available appointment slot. Go ahead and pick a session from there. And then we've also got an upcoming third of the three-part webinar next week, which is planning for a successful migration into Microsoft 365. And while you might say, you know what, we're already in Microsoft 365, we're using Teams. Depending on where you are on that maturity, you may still be using file shares a lot. You may have on-premises SharePoint. There could still be a lot of work involved in actually getting you fully adopting Microsoft 365. We've got a lot of experience around that. And what we're going to be talking about is how you plan that out. Things like information architecture, which in the past was very SharePoint focused, now needs to be very Teams focused first, and then SharePoint kind of rolls out from that. And then how do you build out that team structure as you move from just individual chats into using channel conversations? What should those channels and teams represent? What sort of governance and automation do you want to have around that? And then just how do you drive that user adoption side of things? So I want to say thank you to everybody for joining this afternoon. Hope you found the session useful, and by all means tune in next Wednesday as well for the last session from there. Thanks, Evan. Have a great rest of your day.